Welcome to the Legacy Keepers podcast. I'm Anita, and this is my co-host, Kare, and we're here today to talk about a different angle when it comes to memoir writing, and that is the view of the reader. So what kind of emotions come up when we read someone else's memoir? Kare, I know you're having that experience right now because we just finished interviewing someone who wrote their memoir, and right after, I'll let Kare explain what's come up for her.
Yeah, right after we finished our recording with that guest, and we sort of exited our online room and I was waiting, for you elsewhere. I was having a lot of anxiety come up for me and my stomach was kind of in knots and I just felt like really drained and I had to be like, what's going on? Right.
Mhm.
At first I went, did I eat something funny? But it wasn't that. And I realized that I was having feelings after listening to our guest because I was having feelings that were very difficult. I was feeling like regret. I was feeling loss. I was feeling like I had not cultivated my life in the way that I always thought I would, because our guest clearly has a lot of richness in her life. And one of the core themes that she talked about within her memoir writing journey was the theme of relationships and how those relationships intertwine everything in our lives.
Mhm.
And then hearing how, kind of her life lessons and what her life is today, kind of, in sort of the second half of middle age. Um, and how she's surrounded by the different generations, and she even still has her mom, who's in her late 90s. And it wasn't so much that I was experiencing FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. It was more that I was feeling like, oh, that's the life I always thought that I would have. It's the life that I always
Mhm.
thought that I would be able to cultivate. It's the life that I dreamt of. And honestly, I'll be 100% honest and vulnerable. It's not the life I have. And it's
Mhm.
it's it's interesting because I was talking with a girlfriend of mine that lives here in Mexico as well in the wintertime, and she was talking about her relationship with her daughter, and I was talking about my relationship with some of my children, and how those relationships can sometimes be very um, fraught and they take a lot of energy, no matter how much we love our children, and we do, and we would do anything for them, but we were struggling with the fact that those relationships didn't always fit the picture that we once had that they would fit you know
Mhm.
and so I guess it was coming off of that conversation, and then hearing from our guest today, recognizing the losses that I've had in my life because of my mother's side of the family. Other than my uncle, who lives very far away and I don't really have a lot of contact with him, all of the other women in that generation are long gone. They died very early, like in their 60s. My mom
Mhm.
and my aunt, and then their mother had passed on before that. So there is a lot of loss. I have loss. I have grief. I have regret. I feel sometimes like an island unto myself, and I have to navigate the complexities of life on my own. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's even more hard because other people in my life, for whom I would feel often, who I would feel like I want them to give me that love, that boost, that joy. Sometimes I'm still in a situation with them, in a pattern with them, in which I'm still just having to take care of them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really loved our interview with her, and I really enjoyed what she had to say, and it was joyful to hear it, but it was also very hard for me.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't read her full memoir, and she's written a whole entire book, not just a
Yes,
chapter about her life. So
yes,
I'm sure it's very full. The thing is that when it's like reading a Facebook post of someone who's come through something and now is on the other end and they make their post, right? And you think, oh, well, that was quick and easy. And yet they had to live through a whole long thing to get to that point. So I don't know with our guest maybe she had years where those relationships weren't good. And now she's on the other side of that, and it sounds all roses and cozy and everything. But we don't know the journey along the way until I read her book, which I would be very curious to read. But everybody has those times in their life where like, oh, this wasn't what I expected my
Hmm.
life to be like, right? Like,
Yeah,
I'm divorced. I never expected that to happen in my life. And
yeah,
there's different things that happen, and we see someone else that we think, oh, their life looks so much better. That's what I want. And yet,
yeah,
I mean, she's like 70-ish, I think, and we don't know what her life was like when she was our age in her 50s. Maybe there was years of, you know, disruption between those relationships, and now they've worked through it. I don't know. That doesn't
yeah.
make your feelings any less real to you now, because we're just seeing her now. And oh, her life does look beautiful. To me, it was almost like hope. Like, she's lost her husband. She's lost other people in her life. She still has her mom, which is amazing. I think she said her mom
Yeah,
was 97, but
yeah.
she has had loss, and she is doing the thing she loves right now. She's traveling, she's writing, and I'm sure there was times in her life where she wasn't doing what she loved.
You have a good point there, and that is very true. And I do appreciate that. That kind of calms me down a little bit because you're right. You are right. And that's the thing about our lives, our timeline. The journey of the timeline, wherever we land in any given moment, is not necessarily where we're going to go, and it's not necessarily where we've come from, right? Because
Mhm.
our life timeline isn't like that. It's like this. There's
Right.
going to be hills and valleys for everybody, even though what those mountains are and what those valleys are going to look different, in everybody's lifetime. But you
Mhm.
you have a good point, and I think what you said too was, obviously, she's experienced loss. She lost her husband, and now she's, living whatever best life that she has. And I guess at the end of the day, I would say um, that would probably be what I would want to take away from this. And I know that as time goes on, you and I are gonna, meet a lot of people,
Yeah.
and listen to a lot of stories and interview a lot of guests and help people write a lot of memoirs. At least that's our goal.
Yes.
And so we're gonna hear a lot, and we are gonna have triggers. I'm sure you and I are gonna have lots of conversations after we've interviewed somebody or processed a memoir, in which we are then having to talk each other down or kind of process our own traumas and triggers. And
Yeah.
and what I want to say is that I think you're right, because you were saying that you felt hope in our guest story. And I was like, you're right, there is hope in that, because even if I can say about my life right now, it's not where I thought I'd be in my late 50s. It's not the life I thought I would cultivate. But you know what? Two things. I can let go of what I thought I would cultivate, because nothing is ever exactly what we think it's going to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
And also, it is to some degree hopeful, because, what that guest has done without realizing it is she said, here's an example. You can use this, you know, as a sample for what you do want to cultivate or not. That's up to you. But that's how I'm going to choose to look at it, because I can still make choices to cultivate, you know, certain
Mhm.
relationships or a certain journey, or take the path less traveled or most traveled, if that's really what I want to do, right? So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
a good point. Yeah.
And also, she, like, to me, she's an inspiration
Hmm.
because she's a woman alone in her 70s, traveling, living in Mexico part-time, living in Canada part-time. She's not sitting back and just letting life happen to her. She must have had experiences where that led her to go like, no, this is my life, and I
That's
get to
right.
choose every day what I do with it, and I'm going to make the
Yeah.
most of it. And
Yeah.
nobody gets to our age or age 70 without hardship. and
Very true.
without times in their life where things weren't going the way we expected them or wanted them to, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that I'm really looking forward to hearing so many people's stories because everybody's going to have a piece of that in their story. And
Yeah.
nobody has the perfect life, even though, when I think of even my grandmother and I read her memoir now, and the memoir is only from little to she came to Canada in her 20s. So that was
Yeah.
that piece of her life, which was extremely difficult, running from armies, like not having food, not knowing where they're going to sleep at night, living in the cold, all those things. We read that in a matter of minutes, but
I
that
know.
was years for her, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so and I only knew her after that, of course, because I came along much later, and she was this amazing independent woman who took care of herself and never remarried and raised her kids and came over and baked us amazing things. And so I only saw that piece of her, right? So
Yeah.
each of us
Yeah.
have a different view of that person's life. And I'm just so excited for the upcoming guests we're going to be having and also
Yeah.
for all the stories we're going to be able to read of other people's lives.
Yeah, me too, for sure. So, yeah, it was eye-opening in a lot of ways, but I just wanted to close up to say that, for our listeners, they might, be hearing things that do trigger them. And
Yeah,
that's okay to feel those triggers and feel those emotions. I feel very strongly about being honest about our emotions and about what we're feeling and about being self-reflective in those things because I
exactly.
think that vulnerability, that honesty, even just within ourselves, I am feeling this way. I am triggered by this. And then, that allows us to process as opposed to stuffing down. And so I just want to
Exactly. Yeah,
encourage all of our readers and listeners to just own those emotions, be honest about those emotions. And even if they are, maybe a little more negative than you were thinking originally, to allow to, give license to feel them. And then, if you need healing from that after the fact, that's fine. But allow yourself the privilege to feel it.
exactly. And I'm thanking you so much for being vulnerable with all of us today because you did have a big trigger there.
Good.
I love talking through that because that's something our readers are also going to be going through from time to time.
Well, and thank you for giving me the space to do that and for being my little therapist today. Um, and let's take a moment just to close out so our listeners can move on and do something else with their day. This is Kare and Anita reminding you to keep your legacy alive.